Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Kait Boyle. She's an endurance athlete and environmentalist, a lover of adventures and wilderness. She's a 2018 WEMBO Women's Solo World Champion, possibly one of the bravest and strongest people I've ever met. We're here with Kait on the back of her 2022 campaign and finale, Ligure. Hi, Kait. Thanks so much for making the time to speak with us today. How are you feeling?
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me back. It's so great to see you again, now on different sides of the world. I'm feeling good, all things considered. Yeah.
And we'll talk about all those things that we're considering that are being considered. But firstly, you've been back in Idaho for a couple of weeks after your campaign. It was pretty huge. You've already done some rad stuff. I know I was really looking forward to getting home and getting back into my rhythms again. You've done some pretty amazing stuff when you've landed. Firstly, like you've been on a pack rafting trip, which is new to me. I'm sure it's new to a few people. And your fur child, Hank, would have been amazing to see him again. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, he's sleeping right now because we just got back from a little ride. My post-finale, maybe for a while, riding regime mostly looks like riding with Hank. So while I'm recovering, Hank is getting really strong. He actually just got a Strava QOM. Which just made me laugh so hard. So he's sleeping on the floor. If he wakes up, I'll get him on the screen.
Right.
But yeah, it's been just amazing being here at home. One, summer starting. It's my favorite season here. It really only lasts like 2 months. And so to get to come home to my favorite time of year here, just carrying a lot to process, and then to have like a really cute little brown dog who just loves mountain biking and going outside, and then like it just helps me get out of my own head and my body to be like, oh yeah, I'm riding my bike and it doesn't matter if it's only for 45 minutes or on like the kid trail. Like I'm still on a trail with my dog and he thinks this is the best thing in the world. And so I'm going to think it's the best thing in the world. And then, yeah, that's more or less how the last 3 weeks have been. Has it been 3 weeks? 2 weeks? I don't know. And yeah, Will, my partner Will, who came to finale and crewed for me and drove across the United States with me in April to help me with the Pisgah stage race. He's just been so huge in helping me race the last couple of months, and just in the last 3.5 years of this journey to like getting to a place where I could believe I could win a 24-hour world championship again. We got home and he was like, great, can we do something other than ride bikes? I'm like, yeah, we can do that. So we went pack rafting, which neither of us had ever done, but we actually met working on whitewater rafting courses for Knowles here in Idaho. So, and he's a kayaker, so the river's his happy place. And so we're like, well, we want to bring Hank. I don't kayak because I don't want to be upside down in water. And rafting is just kind of a lot of logistics and gear. So we borrowed some pack rafts and walked like 5 miles into the mountains and camped in the rain, and then floated out on a really lovely creek with Hank, and it was wonderful. And it was only 24 hours away from the car, and it was still just so restorative and lovely.
Oh, I can imagine. I mean, that process of getting up, looking outside of a tent and knowing that there's no footprints out there but yours.
Totally. And bears and wolves.
Oh, bears and wolves and those sort of things.
Yeah, but we saw those, which is so cool, like, yeah.
And I always find it kind of incredible that Australia builds up this image of everything in Australia will kill you, and then you hear this story of bears and wolves.
Yeah.
We've got drop bears and we've got dingoes, we don't even have drop bears. That's a lie. But
but you have snakes and bugs, and to me that's like way more scary than bears and wolves.
But yeah, it's interesting. I was over in finale, and I was putting my hand on something, and my wife said, "Hey, there's ants on your hand," and my Australian reaction used to go, "Ah, ants!" Because I would take a finger.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And I went, "Oh, they're Italian ants. That's fine. They can stay there."
Just like everything else in Italy, they're great.
Yeah, that's right. They're great. It's just arrogant outback Australian, though, sometimes got to be said. Right, yeah, so you like it was a long way from Idaho to Italy. You made an effort to break out of the race village microcosm, which is, you know, a lot of athletes just get there and get into the race central. There was, you know, a lot of cool things about Finale, and you got out and amongst it. Can you tell us about some of the things in Italy and Finale in particular that, you know, really blew your mind, that made the memories galvanized for you?
Yeah. Well, to work backwards a little bit, the day after the race ended, I had a moment of feeling kind of dumb for flying halfway around the world, to like realize that maybe 24-hour racing isn't viable for me. And then I looked around and was like, oh, we're on the Mediterranean, like in the ocean. We're having like the best food. The culture is incredible. And everyone who came over to support me is very happy right now. They're like on an amazing vacation, and it's snowing at home. And so that, I think, just speaks to like what an incredible destination to get to go with your bike, race or no race. And so like, even though my race itself wasn't necessarily what I was going for, like those other 8 days I was in Finale were incredible. Like to have a place where there's a medieval fort that's like the downtown with all the amazing Italian things that you consume, from like cappuccinos to pastries to focaccia and pizza and pasta and wine and seafood, like gelato, all those things. And just the culture of like a small Italian town, you know, it's like so confined by the mountains that like it is very condensed in a very classic, at least to my brain, very classic Italian and European way, and old. And then with that, there's mountain bikers everywhere. Like there's a bike shop on every corner. Every time you go down the road, someone is riding their mountain bike down the road there. And that someone, yes, there are a lot of young dudes, but there are also more women on bikes than I've ever seen anywhere in one place. There are more older people on bikes than I've ever seen anywhere in one place. More kids on mountain bikes. Like and it was the whole spectrum, from like people you're like, oh, they're probably a professional enduro racer, to like, oh, they flew in and they're on a rental and they're having a great time. And I really think it's because of the e-bike and shuttle culture there that like isn't not necessarily, that's not what draws me to mountain biking, but it's being in a place where like that's what makes it accessible, and what makes suddenly this culture of like mountain biking being what everyone does. That was so cool. And there's a bike rack in front of every single like 800-year-old building with people in their knee pads and their baggy shorts or whatever they're wearing. You know, they just went for a mountain bike ride and now they're having whatever meal it is of the day. So I just thought that was amazing. And then beyond the bike culture and the food, just to be in a place where like there is such incredible mountainous relief, and then you're down at the ocean, and the Mediterranean's beautiful. Like I actually don't love oceans. I don't love feeling sticky. I don't like the current. Like I don't like the fish. I really don't like sand. So like generally me and beaches aren't like a thing. But I loved the beach there because it was rocky and it was like the perfect temperature. It's super buoyant. It's turquoise, like they say, like the paint chips, you know, that you get at least Home Depot here. That's like Mediterranean blue, and you're like, is that a real color? It is. And it's in Finale. So it's just amazing. And I think that one of the things that I left knowing about when I left Finale was that I was going to be coming back.
And that's something that I think a lot of people who go to Finale are surprised by, like how beautiful it is and how strong the urge is to return. And even here we were going, oh, do we want to travel? Oh, I'm not sure post-COVID. Do I want to go? And then it's like Finale, yes. Just why? Yes, we're going.
Totally. And I know it's like tempting to be in Europe and to go to all different places, but I like, at least for me personally, I could probably get to Finale and not have a rental car and just be there and be perfectly content, because there's so many trails, there's so many restaurants, the beach is always great. Like you just don't need to go anywhere else to further enrich the experience. And the people are wonderful. So
Now, onto the race circuit. So let's talk about the course for a bit. So, you know, we know Finale's got amazing mountain biking. One of the things about the 24-hour course in Finale that it drags in a lot of those incredible pieces of terrain. Rumor had it, at least when I was racing in 2017, that some of the climbs that you did in the 24 solo were used by the EWS guys to come down.
Cool.
And I mean, that's all pretty hectic. Now, can you tell us, you know, when you first did a lap of the course out there, what did it make you feel? Were you sort of like, well, really, is this what the course looks like? Or was it sort of, did it fit into what your expectations?
It really exceeded my expectations. I think that because of prior year lap times, I was expecting it to be really fast and really short. And I believe it has gotten longer maybe since 2017.
Yeah, it was certainly longer. Yeah,
okay.
I think I did 36
You're
laps.
like,
There's no way I could do 36 laps on that 2022 course. No way.
Right. I think it was like a 5-mile lap and we had like an 8-mile lap or something like that.
It was longer and harder. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I got on the course, and after the first lap, I was like, this is amazing. Like, I can actually ride this for 24 hours and be engaged and happy about it. And like, it was really, I don't know why it was unexpected other than just that thought about past lap times. And maybe like the elevation profile just doesn't quite communicate how engaging that terrain is. Like, it on the elevation profile, it's like, okay, you like, it's kind of punchy for a little bit, and then you go down a little bit, and then you go up a little bit, and then you go down, and then you do that again. But in real life, it's like constantly changing, and it's both the grade of the trail, but then also the surface of the trail, and then also the views in the environment. And so having a section that was in the woods and really tight, and you're like in the woods and you can't see around you or really anyone else except the trail in front of you, and then it opening up into that way that it does, where you have a huge view and you see the ocean, and then you're in that point in the more technical part and climbing part, I guess in general, just like the more demanding part, and then you're quickly at the top and you have a really different style of descent back to the beginning. Like, I just thought that was really nice, because there was never a period where it dragged on, you know, like even the longest climb, I don't actually remember how long it was taking, let's say 15 minutes, like that went by pretty quickly because it kept changing. It was like single track, then 2-track, and then 2-track with a view, and then onto single track again, and then single track with a view, and then you're done.
Yeah.
And so in that way, it was nice.
Yeah, and also I guess too, the Italians added those extra flavors that, you know, going down through the Burns, which turned into a dance party. Or
Totally.
when you went through the race village, you go through all the tents, and then you go up in front of the stage, you know, past the band. All those.
Yeah, that was cool.
That was kind of cool. But it was hot, right? Did that creep up on you? Because it was way hotter than 2017. It was brutal. How was that for you? Did you know your survival strategies around that?
Yeah, so well, when I got to Finale, it was in the low 70s. I'm sorry, I'm not very good with Celsius.
I
think it was like 19 or something.
19 or 20, yeah.
Yeah, like it was cool, or not cool, but it wasn't hot. And then it was forecasted to be in the low 80s, which I think was like 30-ish on race day. And then I heard during the race in the afternoon, a photographer told me it was 37, which I looked up later, and that's 98 degrees Celsius, which is like way hotter than 80.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. And the course itself has this section that's the long climb is self-facing, and the dirt is really light in color, and so it's just radiating off you, and there's no breeze. And so it felt like just this inferno. And at one point, it was actually when I caught Gaia, I was like, Gaia, it is really hot. And she just looked at me, she's like, this is not normal. It is very hot. We're on fire. And I was like, yeah. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, everyone feels hot right now, even the Italians. But my strategy going into this, like, I knew coming from Idaho, where I'd been training in snow, and like a warm day was in the 40s. degrees Celsius or Fahrenheit. I did a week of heat acclimatization protocol where I sat in a sauna or a hot tub for a half an hour immediately after every ride. And apparently that triggers this whole physiological adaptation of increasing your blood plasma volume to help you adapt to heat.
I'm actually
and so I'd like to
a firm believer of that. For
Yeah.
the audience, that's called hypothermic conditioning. You should
Totally.
go and look it up because it is really good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was advised to do this by a friend who like was going to Tokyo for the Olympics, and like that's what the USA Olympic team was doing. And my nutritionist was also coaching some of the folks going to Tokyo, and so they were all like, "You have to do this."
Yeah.
And for me, even expecting it to be in the 70s, like that was a big enough jump. Like that was like a 35-degree jump from what I was normally training in, and so I knew I had to do it. And I actually felt a difference. Like they say that when you're acclimated to the heat, you actually start sweating sooner and you sweat a lot because your body is like ready and it's primed to cool itself down. And that's one thing I noticed was that I was just sweating a ton. So I went in with having already done that as a strategy. And then I also just had a hydration and electrolyte replenishment protocol for, I think it was like 500 milligrams of sodium or something, whatever that I don't remember, sorry. But it was a lot, and it was just for every hour. And that was working, but the challenge that I quickly faced was that it was so hot. And in Italy, they like coolers and ice are not really a thing.
Yeah.
Only bartenders have the ice. And I just got to a point in the middle of the afternoon where I was like, I just need cold water and to be drinking something cold. And I wasn't ever planning on wearing a hydration pack, but it was like, if I can wear a cold hydration pack on my back, that's going to cool me down a lot.
Yeah.
And so then Will and Rachel and Dave and Kelly realized in their hunt to find ice at the venue that they had to start drinking cocktails to have ice. Because they got to the bartender and they're like, "You have ice. Can we have some?" They're like, "No." You cannot have some. They're like, "We can't have a cup of ice." They're like, "No." And they're like, "Okay, we would like an Aperol spritz." All of us. And they would drink an Aperol spritz while I was out doing my lap, and they put their ice from their cocktail into my hydration pack. And I didn't know this at the time. I didn't know it until the next day. But then I was like, "Oh, this is great." I'm like, my back is cooling down. They were pouring a whole gallon of water over my head every lap. And like, it felt excessive, but I just like anything to have that evaporative cooling and to have just like that sensation of something being colder.
Yeah.
And that got me through it. And I guess the other minor strategy, although it didn't even feel like a choice, my body just felt like it turned on this internal governor that was like, you're not riding harder than this pace, and so that you don't overheat. And the crazy thing was that at first I was like, wow, my lap times have slowed a lot in the afternoon. Like once it suddenly felt hot, like I've slowed faster than I thought I would slow. And as soon as it cooled down, I sped up.
Yeah.
And I was grateful for that internal, whatever it was, the thing. I was like, nope, you're not going harder.
Well, it should be pointed out too that the humidity was into like the high 80s. It was like 85, 87% humidity. So it was sort of bordering on that sort of tropical levels of humidity. And that's one of the things that, particularly like you and I both come from dry climates where it's hot. When it's hot, it's dry.
Which is great.
Yeah, really hard to cool down.
Yeah.
Really interesting. Now, you cut 14 laps, which is a pretty incredible effort, given all the things that we'll talk more about. You caught Gaia at around lap 7 or 8, and you were leading the elite women's for a few laps after that. Now, you usually ride with a bit of back pain, a bit of discomfort, based on the accident, etc. That you generally just ride through. You would have passed Gaia and gone, "Hey, I've just passed the leader of the race. I'm in the lead." How did you feel at that moment? Were you sort of feeling optimistic, or was your body starting to throw up little warning lights at that point?
No, at that point, I was still feeling great. I mean, it was still hot out. And so there was that part of not feeling great.
Yeah.
But as far as my energy in my legs and my back and glute and like everything still felt great. And at that time, I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like, I wasn't expecting to be moving into the lead at this point, but I feel great. And so if I can just keep doing this, then that's all I have to do.
Yeah.
And that lasted for probably 3-ish more laps.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we were sort of watching that because we were watching you catch Gaia, and then we were going, oh, Kate, this is where she is now. She's in the lead of the race, and I don't think anyone in the at least the commentary booth was surprised by that. We're going, this is a great race. This is looking good. And then after a little while, and Chelsea, when you know, you've spoken with her and I've spoken with her, etc. Chelsea Magnus, who went on to win, she recounts, you know, part of the best parts of the race as riding with you. Now she caught you after about those 3 or 4 laps where you were in the lead and everything was working okay. Now that would have been quite a lot of fun. Jason English always recounts this idea of riding with your friends during these races and having a great old time. Now that would have been some fun to have that happen. But Chelsea caught you. Were you starting to feel? You would have been starting to feel pretty crap as she was beginning to reel you in. You described the sort of the binary sensations about, you know, riding with someone having a great time, but knowing it's not going to last.
Yeah, that was really hard because on one hand, like I really loved riding with her, and we got to pre-ride a lap together a few days before the race. And so I just really enjoyed riding with her then. And so then when she caught me, when I was standing at the pit starting to talk to Kelly, who is also my physio, about what was going on, we left and we're riding together, and it was just really this conflicting thing of like, oh, this is awesome, I get to ride with her, and maybe this could actually like lead to distracting me enough from what's going on that like it will just stay as this like subtle thing and I'll just not pay attention to it because I have this really fun new friend to ride with, and to like keep kind of pushing that pace a bit, you know, because like at that point I was in a level of discomfort where like my body was wanting to back off. And so that worked for a little while. And then I think it was probably on my second to last lap where I was like, oh, this is really deteriorating quickly and I don't know about this anymore. But because of like me backing off a bit on climbs, but then catching up with Chelsea on descents, like we were doing this kind of like back and forth thing. And so we'd come back together and I just kept having these like highs with her of being like, one, just like mentally brought away from what was going on just in my head of like, oh my God, this is really not working out, to just being in a really happy place of like getting to have a conversation and getting to see her like feeling really good and like just getting to share the experience. Because I think one of the interesting things that was actually different than Scotland was racing in Italy, where there were so many different nationalities with different languages that like I didn't ever really know who spoke English, and I unfortunately don't speak Italian or French or German. And so, and the American and Canadian and Australian guys, like they'd catch me and say something and then fly by, you know, so I never had a conversation with any of them. It was just like, oh, hi, you're doing great. And then they're off. And so like getting to ride with Chelsea was really the only time in the 12 hours I was racing where I was with someone like actually really talking about things, you know, whether it was related to the race or just like completely unrelated, you know, like adventure racing or kids or whatever, you know. So that was just so fun. And I do think, and it's like just really interesting to think about, but like I kind of had to end up in this like really rapid decision-making process of like what's going on with my body, just deciding to stop and fix it. Because once you decide to stop and fix it, you're deciding to like let this gap build and letting her just keep going without me. And the likelihood of like re-catching up just gets less, you know?
Yeah.
And so I just had this moment of being like, you know, like I just need to do what I need to do. And Chelsea is so wonderful and like she's having a great race and I know what that feels like and I'm really happy for her.
Yeah.
And we can get to like what then happened with me, but I ended up coming back the next day to like get to see her finish because like it feels so good to win and I wanted to see her experience that.
Yeah.
So
Well,
and it was really like the moment I stopped, I was like, I have to like tell Kelly what's going on. And that means like Chelsea's starting a lap without me. Like that was actually the hardest point of the whole race.
Wow. Now, and this that segues into where it got pretty dark. After about lap 14, your body started doing cruel and wicked things that bodies will do to us when they're really unhappy.
Yeah.
Right? Now, it's fair to say that for those people who've never been shot by a high-powered rifle in the hip, and Kait hasn't been, but it's kind of the same sort of trauma. That you know the decision to stop or the decision to seek treatment, etc., would have been. It's not a decision at all, really, is it? It was sort of like it was just a brutal and hard fact that you're in this position now. Can you tell us how you were feeling at that time, and maybe the kaleidoscope of emotions that you were dealing with?
Yeah. Well, I think it started on the last lap I did. The last section of the course has that longer climb, and the last part of the longer climb is probably the most technical part of climbing of the whole course, where there's some like bedrock rutted spots, and that had all been fine for me the whole time. And but it takes these little like power moves. And in one of the sections, I put in one of those power moves and just got this like shooting pain down my leg, which the problem I was having was not new to me. It's something that I had been dealing with a little bit in training for Worlds and have dealt with for the last few years, really on and off. But it never caused this like shooting pain down my leg. And we know that shooting pain is generally not a good sign for anything. And when that shooting pain happened, I fumbled because I was like, oh my God, and then with that, I had to get off my bike and push it. And when I got off my bike, I couldn't stand on my right leg without shooting pain. And that was the first time I've ever, in the last 3.5 years, been in a place where I actually couldn't stand, like put weight on a leg. And so that was this moment of like, oh my God, what is happening? Like, this is really bad. Like, this isn't just a tight back or like tendinitis-y feel, like that I know really well too, and am okay with on some level. But I had to like use my handlebars to like push and hop my bike up and then get back on and kind of like soft pedaled my way through the rest. And that's when I stopped to talk to Kelly, and I pulled over at the pit, which is like still in the course, but there's enough room for 2 bikes. And I was standing there and I was like, I can't stand on my leg. And at that point I was like, I think pretty freaked out. And she was just trying to get me to move my back a little bit and like see if I could like get off the course. And I think my body or my mind at that point, like it knew how much it hurt to just stand, that I wouldn't move, which it feels so dumb to say, but I was like, I just can't move. Like it's going to hurt too much.
Yeah.
And then apparently I was about to get run over by someone. I still have I didn't see it because they were behind me. So I have no idea how this was happening because I feel like there was enough room, but Kelly and Rachel pulled me to get me out of the way because I was apparently about to get run over, and I weighted that leg and I just like crumpled like and was just screaming. And it's like, I don't want to sound dramatic, and like my 10 for pain is like a shattered pelvis with a ruptured bladder and a broken sacrum and like everything that happens when you get hit by a truck. And that was like an 8.5 maybe, just like, this is not okay. But they got me into our pit and there was a bench. And then Kelly worked on my back for like at least an hour. And at some point after like 5 minutes, I was like, oh, I'm stuck. Like, I'm not getting up. I'm not like, I can't stand, I can't walk there. I don't know how I could possibly ride a bike, but I'm not really there yet. And so they she just worked on me and my friend Rachel, who's there. She's a therapist, like a mental health psychologist. And she was helping too with just like breathing, because with the shooting pain, you think nerves, and then with nerves, you think nervous system. And they were just like, if we can get everything to just kind of like calm down, maybe it'll be okay.
Yeah.
And ultimately what happened is I went from just having zero mobility in my back, like unable to do any sort of like pelvic tilt. It was just rigid, to having a little bit of mobility in my back, but I still couldn't stand or walk on my own at all. And it's probably really obvious sounding, but Kelly was like, I don't want you riding your bike. Like, I really don't recommend that you ride your bike if you can't stand or walk unassisted. Like, that could lead to much greater injury. Which I think that like I knew, but there's just this level of relief to have someone who can objectively look at you and be like, no, you know, because then you just don't have to be like, well, am I just not tough enough? Or am I just tired? You know, or like, did I overheat? Now I'm not making good decisions. Because it just eliminated that, and it just turned it into like a no, you're risking worse injury if you keep riding. This isn't worth it. And we don't think you could even get on your bike if you wanted to. And so at that point, like, it's really great. I'm just so grateful she was there, because she took incredible care of me. And I just know that like we did everything we could, and that's all you can do. Yeah. And so I got carried to the car. The traffic guy there in the middle of the night seemed very concerned. He's like, you should go to a doctor. And we're like, oh, we're gonna go to sleep. And then I came back and when I woke up the next morning, I was able to stand and kind of hobble around stiffly, and that was good. So it did just take like sleeping to be able to like not have shooting pain. And we came back to the race, and I got to see Chelsea finish, and it was awesome, and got to see you and rest.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been just an incredible, 45 minutes or so, or as you said, an hour and a half thereabouts, going through that. I know that would have been hard for pretty much everyone. It's a really insightful, it's an amazing insight to see that process, and particularly the relief to know that something is as final as that, in a way, to go, hey, cool, this is a decision that is being not necessarily made for me, because no one's really making the decision. It's just like a harsh reality. And it takes a lot of strength in a lot of ways to identify that's a reality, that there are no options out of this. That's just a reality, right? If things just stop working, that is just the thing stopped working. I can't will that be different.
Totally.
And, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength to do that, because quite often we'll just not have that courage. We'll try and wish it away and not face into that reality, which can be quite painful.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like, I've thought about this a lot, because in a way I'm like, who gets in this car accident that I got in and then decides that they think that they should try to win this world championship race again that happens to be 24 hours long? And like, arguably ultra endurance bike racing, or probably any sort of ultra endurance racing, like, it's the hardest on the healthiest of bodies. It just exposes the cracks in anything, whether it's your brain or your fitness or your gut or the like physical structure of your body, especially like in my case, that's what this is. But I think that the thing that feels so good now, that's so different than like 4 weeks ago, when I was leading up to this, was like, now I know, like, I gave it everything and I can't do that. And it feels so good to know that I tried and I gave it everything, because if I like, whether it was 3 years ago or even a month ago, if I was like, well, I don't know, and just like not tried, like, you always, at least I would always have lived with that like question mark of like, well, what if, like, and I think to be able to be ready for it to not work out and to deal with that with as much grace as you can. And like, it feels way more amazing than not knowing. And then I do have one other little story that I just want to share, because it speaks to the event. On the last lap, so this is the lap like right after I couldn't stand and I was hobbling with my bike and being like, oh my God, this is really bad. Like, I've never not been able to walk. So then we have the descent with the berms. And at that point, I was really quickly going to this place of like, I don't like, my race is over. Like, I can't ride for another 12 hours if I can't walk. And even if I can, in some crazy pain tolerance sort of way, like, I don't know, like, I probably shouldn't, you know, for the future of my body. And so I was descending with this like really quick, like kind of heavy feeling of like, oh my God, this is sad. You know, I was feeling sad. And then I got to the Toboga party. And I think that's how you say it.
Yeah.
And that was the first lap for me that it had been set up.
Yeah.
And so suddenly this like very dark part of the course was just lit up with these neon lights and a DJ and just like all these people, and they didn't know who I was. I mean, it's dark. Like, one, I don't think anyone knew who I was anyway, and that doesn't matter, but like, they're just there and they erupt in cheers.
Yeah, right.
And I was like, they're just cheering for me. They're just cheering because I'm just here, like racing on a bike. Like, they're doing this for everyone. And that is the best part of this race. And that was like the highlight probably of any 24-hour race I've ever done. It was just coming in out of the woods and seeing this crowd of people who are just having the best time in the middle of the night in Italy, in the woods, and like cheering for everyone and making them feel like a hero. And that was the moment where I was like, oh, I'm so happy to be here right now.
Yeah, the Toboga Berms, and they were bigger than I've ever seen them.
Yeah.
They were amazing. And in fact, I went up there a couple of times and couldn't even get onto this massive, the fringe of this massive amphitheater where all these people were. It was such an incredible thing. And, you know, despite all the things that the Italians might mess up in terms of a bike race, that having a good time is not one of them. Right. They're always able to have an amazing time.
They had a great time. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So
you, after this, you came back to the race. You saw Chelsea win. You know, that puts a great punctuation mark at the end of that campaign. Did you get a chance to take your team away and put them in front of some huge pizzas and some Campari, some Aperol spritzers and that sort of thing in the wrap up of all this?
Totally. Like, we, from the finish line, like, Will and I had gone up there. We went back to our apartment down in Finale and we just went straight to the beach, and we brought food with us, and just spent the afternoon there. And like, we were there really like a lot earlier than we would have been if I had finished the race. And so like, I felt like there's, at least for me, the sense of like feeling really guilty and like I let people down by not finishing or not winning or whatever, you know, because like, I know a lot of people believe in me, and I looked around and was like, no one's disappointed. Like, everyone is having a great time right now. We're on the beach in the Mediterranean. And like, that is when it dawned on me that like, there was still a lot to celebrate. And actually, like, in a way, like, even more than for me to celebrate than one, like, a result would have given me. Because it was like through the lens of like everything in the last 3.5 years, which all 4 of those people who were with me have been a huge part of. And so we just had a great time. Like, we relaxed on the beach. We went up to Borgo and just had like amazing dinners. And on Sunday morning, Kelly bought this like gallon of wine straight from the, what is it called? The fermentation, like, giant vat.
Right, yeah.
And she was like, oh, now we just have, like, we were driving to the airport later that day to return our rental car. She's like, well, we all have to finish this. And so it was like very relaxing, and we didn't leave Finale, but we just enjoyed everything about it, from the coffee and the food and the wine to the beach and gelato, you know. And it was only, the race ended on a Saturday. We all flew out Monday morning, and so we only had like a day and a half, but it was plenty amount of time to get to hang out and just relax and be like, all right, well, that was that. And we're really proud of us.
Totally. I think that, and the reason I asked that question is because it means so. It's, as we say, it's a 24-hour solo, but it's a team event. And
they had to drink Aperol spritzes to get me ice.
That's right. That's commitment.
No, they worked their butts off. Like, I think that they arguably had a much harder job than I did for the first 12 hours.
Yeah. So I dare say their commitment to your cooling has probably taken the edge off that.
I think so. Yeah, now I look at the pictures of Will. I'm like, oh, that's why he looks so happy. Like, I thought he just liked bike racing suddenly.
I'm a big fan. I'm a massive fan. Now, final question. I know that when I was racing, I retired after every single race I ever did.
Yeah.
Right, particularly 24s. I'd be laying there going, I'm never doing this again, etc. I think of all the people I've heard retire, your reason to retire is about as legit as it comes. Right? There's certain things that are a reality that you've appreciated, which I think is incredible. So despite all the achievements that you've had in ultra endurance racing, 24 solo in particular, what does the future hold for you now? What's exciting you about the next couple of months? If that's even there.
Totally. Well, I think that, I mean, the thing when thinking about the retirement thing is like, in a way, like, I don't feel like I chose it. You know, I think of it right now, it's like not a choice. It's a reality. And it's interesting. I just had an orthopedist appointment today. I had a CT scan and I'm about to get an MRI and a bone scan because the orthopedist was like, oh, this is interesting. And then he's like, yeah, mechanics and orthopedists, those are the people you don't want to say.
That's right. I was about to say. Accountants. Mechanics.
Yeah, exactly.
Using the word interesting is really bad. Yeah.
Right. And so and that was just this morning. And so I'm honestly still just like being like, oh, okay, this is interesting. But he's saying we have some detective work to do to really figure out what is going on. One of his theories, just based on kind of the anatomy of what's happening, is that I have a partial tear of a hamstring, which, if that is the case, continuing to race could have been on the trajectory of ripping my hamstring off my pelvis, which he told me very seriously today that I do not want to do, because while he can put it back on there, it will never be the same. And so really, like, I've known obviously something's not right, and today is the first day that I'm like, okay, well, this might be like a longer term healing thing, or like something that I just really have to like be diligent about letting recover before pivoting onto like something different that's still big, you know? And so in my ideal world, and this is what I'm really hoping for and like breathing belief into right now, is that I can have a summer of mountain biking in the mountains and go on day rides. And then in August, I have a plan with my teammate and one of my best friends, Kurt Refsnyder, to go back to Europe actually and to bike pack across the Alps.
Wow.
Using mostly like a hut-to-hut style to try to travel light. And the trail system there is just incredible. And for me, that's long enough away that it feels like it should be attainable, but I do need to be able to do like 5 to 8 hour days, hopefully. Not racing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the goal for this year. And I think that like it's also, I find this really interesting, but like I set my summer up, I think subconsciously ready for this to not put all my eggs in the ultra racing basket. So I don't have anything else planned for this year that I actually have to say, no, I can't do that. Because of the ultra racing limitation. Everything else I was planning on doing at this point was like this big trip in the Alps, racing an enduro, which I just learned the minute before I got on this call, was canceled today because of all the flooding we are having in the Yellowstone area.
Oh, wow.
Which, if you haven't seen that on the internet, you should Google it. There's historic, like the highest ever recorded flooding in the greater Yellowstone area, which is like where Tour Divide goes through. I mean, Yellowstone is generally a known part of the US, being like one of the first national park.
Yeah.
But it has obliterated the roads and bridges and any infrastructure that's on like a floodplain. Like there are houses being washed down the river.
The technical term for that's holy shit. I think Will Lovner's actually doing the Tour Divide 3,400-mile ride. He'll probably ride straight through or into that.
Yeah, so he's starting, I just saw this today, he's starting this weekend. And so the race started last Friday, and I don't know if he delayed it to recover more, which is probably a good idea, or to avoid the weather they've had, but the whole northern part of Montana, down all the way, I guess, to the southern part of Montana would be Yellowstone. They've just had a ton of snow, like 3 feet of snow on the course, and nonstop rain, which has led to this like rapid snow melt of our lingering snowpack and the rain on a saturated soil. And so, I mean, for anyone listening, if you want to see, if you haven't seen these yet, but just wild footage of like what happens in historic flooding, just Google Yellowstone flooding, because it's mind-blowing. But the enduro I was going to do is in Big Sky, which is just on the edge of Yellowstone.
Yeah.
And they canceled it because there's a state of emergency for everyone, all the towns surrounding Yellowstone. Like they've evacuated 10,000 people out of the park.
Holy shit.
I know.
Wow.
It's a big park.
Yeah.
So
it's like a small city. Just pull it out of Yellowstone.
Yeah. But so that's a tangent. But yeah, I think right now I am in a place of like, the immediate future is a bit dictated on this detective project of what is wrong and what do I really like, what do I need to do to heal it. Into the summer, like these more backcountry oriented adventures and some kind of trail and climate advocacy projects. And then longer term, like I think that like for the last 3.5 years, I haven't been racing ultras. I've been training to and like getting ready to and doing everything I can to be like at the top of that again. And now I just feel like I have a lot of mental and physical energy that will be available to pursue these other ways that I love riding. And like, there's certainly a twinge of sadness of being like, oh, I'm not going to get to try to be the, like set an overall record on the Colorado Trail. Like that's sad because I wanted to do that. But now I'm like, well, I just hope I really want another woman too. And in the meantime, like there have been all these other things that have driven my career and passion for mountain biking that are not related to racing ultras, but are more just like backcountry riding and like showing people what you can do with a bike in wild places in a non-competitive format and continuing to improve my skills. And because I do love going fast, like I don't think I'm going to stop racing. I just don't think that it's going to look like it can't look like it's going to be 24 hours or longer. And I will add, just as part of that, is that like I had a realization when Will was like, I don't care if you win world championships. I want to be able to ski and bike with you when we're 70. And he said that the day after the race. And that was the moment I was like, oh yeah, like this isn't about just right now. Like I am so lucky to have this body after this car accident that can still do huge and incredibly inspiring and fun things. And like, I really want to keep that.
Yeah. And that's an incredible thing to realize. I know that we quite often will gamble all the chips at once for a relatively small reward without seeing that big picture. And it's quite powerful to have that realization. And moreover too, I will stress that wasn't a gamble, that just happened. You know, it's not like you put all the chips on black and said, no, I'm not going to do that. It was a full realization. Thank you. That was my last question. I've been talking with Kait Boyle. She's an incredible and inspiring person. It's fair to say that whilst you didn't win at WEMBO, you've won in so many other areas. That has been amazing. I know to go through this in the way that you have is arguably a bigger win than holding the top step of the podium. At least in terms of overcoming tragedy and challenges. Been a real pleasure speaking with you again. I was looking forward to this interview, and it was way better than I thought it would be. Thank you so much.
You did great. Thank you so much, Jason. It means the world to get to talk about it afterwards and to share what I went through and just what that process looks like. Because I know that I'm not the only one who's gone through something like this.
Yeah, and it's meaningful for people inside mountain biking, outside mountain biking. It's meaningful for a whole bunch of us. Thanks again. It was a massive pleasure.
Thank you. Take care.